Now we're going to work on analyzing and describing a graph. So if I asked you to write a paragraph about this graph, and it has to contain these vocabulary words, the main focus you need to concern yourself with is answering the question because. So if I look at this graph and I say, all right, is it discrete or continuous graph? So this is my vocabulary words. I'm going to do this so you can see my graph. You are going to say this is a continuous graph because. So we know it's a continuous graph. Why? Because it's connected by lines and points. So it is a continuous graph because it is connected by lines. Okay, so all these points, it's connected, it's fluid. What is the domain? The domain of this graph is all real numbers because. Okay, so the domain of this graph is all real numbers because when you scan your graph left to right, it goes infinite in both directions. And that's what you have to say. The domain of this graph is all real numbers because when you scan graph left to right, it is infinite in both directions. Okay, so we can check off continuous graph. We can check off domain. Now, let's look at the range. What is the range of this graph? Well, the range is y is greater than or equal to -3. So I'm going to put the range is y is greater than or equal to -3. But the big word is because. Because why? Because when you scan your pencil all the way down, it will never go below -3. And when you scan your pencil all the way up, it goes infinite in the positive infinity direction. So the range is y is greater than or equal to -3 because when you scan pencil down, the graph will never go below -3, and when you scan up, it goes infinite in positive direction. Okay, so we have continuous graph, we have the domain, we have the range. You can say it is a relation. It is a relation because there are infinite x and y values. So remember what a relationship is. It's just a relation between x and y. And if all of these right here represent points, you would have infinitely many values for x and y if I had to name those points. It is a function. It is a function because it passes the vertical line test. Okay. So I said it's a relation because it has an infinite amount of x and y values. I said it is a function because it passes the vertical line test. Now I'm going to talk about the vertical line test. It passes vertical line test because if you made if you made vertical imaginary lines, vertical imaginary lines, it only intersects the imaginary line one time, right? So all these vertical imaginary lines only intersects that graph one time. So I talked about the vertical line test. Now, zeros. The zeros of this function, remember the zeros are where it crosses your x-intercept, the zeros of this function are -1 and 2. So I'm going to put the zeros of this function are brackets -1 and 2 because that is where graph, I'm going to go up here, that is where graph intersects the x-axis. Okay, so that is a lot of information. That is one big paragraph. We talked about all those vocabulary words, but remember the main thing when you're writing your paragraph is you talk about what the vocabulary word is and you say because. So as long as you do that, you introduce the word and then you say why, because, then you should be okay on that paragraph. If you have questions about how to do it, come and see me.